At this stage of language learning, consistency matters way more than perfection. Not because perfection is bad, but because this is the stage where language stops being something you practice and starts becoming something you integrate. Like sleeping, like eating, like brushing your teeth. And if you want something to stay in your life long enough to actually work, it has to be that simple. So the base is built by repetition, not by precision. At this stage, everything feels brand new, and that's actually a huge advantage when you're just starting out or building your base. You don't need to worry about getting every single detail right. In fact, focusing on too much precision early can slow you down and drain your motivation. What really matters is the repetition. The more you expose yourself to the language, the more your brain starts to build connections quietly, even without you noticing. Think back to the earliest things you learned in your target language. You probably know how to say hi, maybe you can count to 10 or say a few simple phrases. But you didn't learn those by studying them perfectly, did you? You learned them because you heard them over and over again in media, songs, conversation, videos, or even just your own attempts to speak. That consistent exposure is what laid the foundation. This is why at this stage, the best thing you could do is just pick up anything you find interesting and keep coming back. Every time you revisit those words and phrases, you're reinforcing your base. It's like building a wall brick by brick rather than trying to paint the perfect picture right away. Many learners get stuck trying to be perfect from the start. They obsess over grammar, rules, pronunciation, thinking that if they don't get it exactly right, they're wasting their time. But here's the truth. You don't have to be perfect to make progress. What you need is consistency, repeating the basics enough that they become second nature. This is exactly why the base phase is designed around repeatable exposure, not performance. It's about giving your brain the chance to absorb patterns naturally, without any pressure. I actually dive deeper into this inside my community because the foundation that supports everything else is this type of mindset. And you might be wondering, but what about grammar? What about accuracy? When I get stuck, if I don't focus on them? And the answer is not at all, because grammar and precision become easier once you tackle and build a solid base with a repeated foundation. And without that base, the grammar rules, they just float in your head without the context, because repetition grounds everything. So remember, your base is built quietly by showing up regularly and repeating what you've already started to know. It's not about perfection, it's about the persistence. That's the engine that will drive your language forward. Perfection creates pressure, consistency creates a runway. A year ago, trying to study Spanish for just 10 to 15 minutes gave me a headache, all right? And I get frustrated with myself for not understanding everything instantly. I repeat things over and over, trying to nail the pronunciation or grammar, feeling like I only had one shot to get it right. Every mistake felt like a failure, and that pressure made me want to quit. Now, things are different. I can easily spend 1 to 3 hours with the language, and it feels no harder than using my native tongue. The difference isn't that I suddenly got smarter or faster. The difference is that my brain learned a crucial secret. I'll get another chance tomorrow. When your brain knows that there's a runway ahead and not a cliff, it relaxes. And when your brain is relaxed, it actually learns faster. This is why perfection, while tempting, it becomes a trap. It creates pressure and stress, which makes learning feel like high stakes performance and high stakes leads to burnout. That's why I say that consistency creates a runway, because it gives your brain enough room to slow down, to make mistakes, and to try again without fear. Instead of thinking you have to master everything right now, consistency allows you to trust the process and trust that you'll return tomorrow to build on what you've already started. Studies show actually that like a relaxed brain absorbs and retains information better than stressed ones, obviously. When you remove that pressure to be perfect, your brain can focus on learning, not worrying. It's like the difference between like trying to sprint on a tightrope and walking on a wide, sturdy bridge. You might worry, if I don't push for perfection, won't I get lazy or won't I get stuck? And the answer is no. Consistency doesn't mean complacency. It means patience. It means building a habit that lasts longer than a burst of motivation. Perfection is like a mirage that makes you sprint hard and burn out faster. Consistency is the slow, steady engine that keeps you moving forward. So next time you feel overwhelmed by the need to get everything done right, remind yourself, you don't have to nail it today. You just need to come back tomorrow. That little mental shift can turn pressure into progress and make language learning feel a lot less scary. So think about like an airplane making its final landing, right? If it had thought that it had to stop instantly, it would just like nosedive right into the runway and destroy itself. But it doesn't. It just glides gracefully, slowing down gradually, because it knows exactly how long the runway is. Language learning is just like that. When you choose consistency over perfection, you're telling your brain you don't have to understand everything today. You'll see this again and again, and that reassurance is what lets your brain relax and actually learn. We all know that native language learning wasn't built in 30 days. You didn't wake up one morning and just like, I know everything, I'm fluent. Instead, exposure stacked day after day, month after month. You absorb sounds, words, patterns, slowly but surely, without stress or pressure. Real progress happens over 3, 6 months, even a year. And here's what most people miss. You do see results in 30 days. Not because you mastered anything, but because you didn't quit. When you stop making learning a painful, high-pressure task and start letting it be a simple, consistent habit, something wild happens, honestly. You start to love it. You want more. It becomes less about chasing levels A2, B2, C2, and more about falling in love with the process itself. I remember when I hated learning Spanish. It was exhausting and frustrating. But now, it takes no more energy than, just brushing my teeth. The freedom to be imperfect, to come back day after day, is what makes this possible. The skill follows that freedom. That's the part most people don't expect. They think skill comes first, but it's the other way around. When you free yourself from the pressure, that's when you get better. The skill grows naturally, quietly, underneath the surface. So, before today ends, spend just 2 minutes with your target language. Watch one video, read one page, or listen to one clip. No pausing, no fixing, just let it flow. That's it, and you can move on. It's the stage where most people either quit, stall forever, or they end up quietly changing their lives. Not because the language itself is hard, but because they just never let it become normal. Something in your life is going to compound. You can either let it be junk, brain rot, scrolling, or the language that you absorb. And if you let the language integrate slowly and perfectly, consistently, it becomes a filter for everything else that you do. I'm past the point of fixing consistency right now. That was the hardest part. Now it's enjoyable. Now the real progress starts to get built, and I've already fallen in love with the process. This is the quiet phase, the one that a lot of people never reach. Not because it's hard, but because it requires letting the habit feel normal. Something will compound in your life regardless. You already know this. You don't get to avoid that. Only choose the direction. I chose skill. The fight for consistency is over. Now it's enjoyable, and that's where the progress starts to accelerate. By the way, no pressure, but there's a link underneath this video where you can have a look at my paid programs. When you trust me enough and feel like my free content has changed your life, you can have a look at that.